Can you actually have a work-life balance? Or is it just a myth like Bigfoot or comfortable high heels? Imagine a world where you can attend a Zoom meeting, cook a 3-course meal, help with algebra homework, and still have time to misplace your car keys. All of that simultaneously. It's the world that so many of us live in, where multitasking is our middle name and the family calendar looks more complex than a NASA launch schedule. In today's episode, we're going to share through the trials and triumphs that we've had of trying to be that superhero at work and a super parent at home. Spoiler alert, it involves a lot of coffee, some forgotten passwords, and occasionally wearing 2 different socks. So today we want to dive into the madness of trying to have it all without losing your mind or your car keys again. Welcome to this episode of Amplified Marriage. I'm Brian.
I'm Natalie.
Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, you know what we're going to tell you. Grab a tea, go for a run, put those earbuds in. We're so glad that you've joined us today. And today we have a special episode. Special. We think every episode is special. And we're talking about work-life balance.
That's right. If you missed last episode, we kicked off the new year with sharing what we do in our family. And we don't call it a New Year's resolution, but more like a
Goals.
New Year's goal setting reflection of the year past. And we talk about the highs and the lows and goals moving forward for this coming year. So if you've missed that episode, go check it out. Today we're talking about work-life balance.
Which we thought was apropos.
Starting off the new year after the Christmas hustle bustle, I think it's appropriate and actually a really great reminder for us because we are living this.
And we're also
while
the
we're
ones
trying to live a work-life balance.
And if you look at our calendar, every time someone sees it, they're like, that's what you guys do? They think that it's just mine. They look at mine. I'm like, no. I have our family calendars. We have dentist appointments, doctor's appointments, drama that's in there. Anytime I have lunch meetings, anytime Natalie has any kind of things that she has to do, it's all in his calendar. And it looks silly when you look at it. But it's all like small chunks of things. But
well, and I mean, speaking of like work-life balance, having a calendar, I think, is absolutely essential. If it's not in the calendar, it's not happening.
Well, I used to be the guy that would just be like, no, I'll just keep it in my mind. It was like people would ask me, are you writing this down? I was like, no, it's in that steel trap of my mind. And eventually, you can only stack so many things you need to remember in a day into a calendar. And it's funny because I see so many young people. This is like an old man saying, I sit on my porch, get off my lawn. This is me saying to you, your music isn't great, but I'm just what I want to say, your calendar, I wish I would have learned younger how important a calendar was going to be for me.
100%. And it's not just scheduling appointments. It's actually scheduling study time. It's scheduling dates.
Yeah. It's all in the calendar.
Right. So it's not, I mean, if you find yourself where that's a useful tool as we kind of break this down,
right,
of like scheduling those times with your spouse.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. I actually think that that's incredibly healthy because you're prioritizing time in your schedule for one another.
Right. And I'm listening right now to a podcast from The Art of Manliness. It's such an amazing podcast, but he's actually he talked in one of his episodes just about that work-life balance between people and curiosity and engaging and being a part of all these things going on. And one of the things that he really zoned in on one of the episodes was just kind of understanding for a man, when we're talking about work-life balance, we spend 8 hours of our day, 10 hours of our day. Sometimes that's not at home.
Right. And
when you have small children like we have in the past, if I get home at 5, by 6:30 or 7, the kids are in bed.
Yep.
Right. So you get 2 hours a day, a week with them sometimes, depending on how early they get up in the morning. Some kids are up at 6 and I was up early.
Our kids were those kids.
Our kids were those kids. But you learn how to balance everything in your life, or it's like a house of cards.
Well, yeah, if you don't balance it, it is a house of cards. And that was how ours started, was definitely like that. It was tumultuous because at that point, like, prior to us having children, I worked a shift work.
Yeah.
And so our schedules even then were sort of off at times. And then when we started having troubles in our marriage, I made sure the schedules were not coinciding.
Right.
Right. And then you have kids and then, left a professional setting and then you're at home.
Well, and then even historically, when you were early married and our marriage wasn't going well, I was at work. When I was working in Alberta, I was gone 12, 14, 16 hours a day, sometimes 6, 7 days a week, sometimes 3 or 4 weeks at a time. And then we'd have a couple of days off together and then I'd just go back to work. And just became the routine.
Exactly.
Right.
And being a stay-at-home mom with
eventually,
babies, right? Like when the kids were little, I didn't work outside. Excuse me. I didn't work outside the home until Amaris was a baby. And then I cleaned a salon and spa with 2 of my friends. And that was like 2 hours once a week that I was gone, right? So it gave me a little bit of money, but I was still 98% of the time at home until the last year or so. Right now that the kids are older and they're more self-sustainable.
Yeah, and they take care of them. So historically, we've always worked, and then we had kids, and then you stopped working.
There was a period, where I didn't.
You worked periodically, fairly often throughout that, but it was never consistent because of the work, and you just couldn't commit to like a 20-hour or 30-hour a week job because we had kids at home. Exactly,
and I think we took advantage of the times of our life living up north where you were laid off. Yeah. Then I took on
work and I was going to school.
Work and you were going to school. Yeah. And so it kind of flipped for a period of time and then it went back to you working and me being at home.
So what can we learn from this? 2 things. One, I worked way too much and it was unhealthy.
Yes.
And then the other thing we can learn from that is that we used me working and us working a lot when the marriage wasn't going well to not deal with problems.
Yes.
Which let's talk about. Let's kind of just go into this a little bit because just even understanding the work-life balance this is the definition that we have for the work-life balance is defined as the ability to effectively manage the demands of one's job while also having the time and energy for personal life and relationships.
Exactly. Like what you value, you will put effort in.
Yeah. Right.
And if you value your work above everything else, that is where
I think the Bible says what you treasure or what you treasure, that's where your heart will be.
Yeah.
Right. And so
it was that for us.
Yeah.
Was you yes, hear us when we say, yes, we need to work. You need income. We're not saying not to work, but there has to be, that can't be your whole life.
Right.
At the expense of everyone else that you're leaving.
Yeah. And like we want to talk about this in such a way. We want to get into some of the consequences of the imbalance when it's not balanced right. And also hear me is that I don't know that you can't 50-50.
No.
Right? Especially me being the man in the relationship and I'm the breadwinner. I go out and I work. I do the bulk of the income.
That's right.
There's no way for me to 50-50 home and work. It actually just isn't possible because of the time that we spend at our jobs.
Right.
And that's historically, that's what it's been. Culturally, that's what it's been. And I think that's how God has designed marriage and God has designed men and women. And there's cases where it's different and that's completely okay. But I'm just saying, like, this is how our house is. And so there's no way to 50-50. But there also has to be an acute awareness, which I was not very emotionally aware for many years. There has to be an acute awareness that it is easy for most men, I would say most men, to just get buried into their job and look at that as their primary focus and actually push the family side. And I know that for me, and maybe not all men, and if you're a man listening to this, maybe this is you, take a moment to reflect, is this you? I had to actively choose to not take the extra couple hours and stay at work, to push myself into further things to do at work, to bury myself on the weekends with doing work.
Right.
And I remember you told me this was like 2 years into me being a pastor at the church.
So this is fairly recently.
Yes, this is
within the last 5 years.
4 or 5 years. And Natalie had to say to me, I'm tired of being a single mom at home. And that kind of shook me. And then when she said that, she followed that with, said, you care more about the church than you do about your family.
Ooh.
Yes, I wish I had a sound that could just like, no. That was, and it was then that guys, this is not very far long ago, and this is something that I still have to watch because I'm a bit of a workaholic, and I like to work. I love my job. I love what I do. I love people, and so this is still recent, and we learned a lot. And there was a time in between everything was balanced, and then all of a sudden it wasn't.
Exactly, and and our kids at this particular instance that we're talking about, we're older.
Yeah.
So this isn't just something that affects or, so from, newborn to 5 years old, this is kind of like what we need to watch out for. No, you need to make sure that you are prioritizing your spouse and your family as well as working and as well as, making time for extracurricular activities that you guys like to do, right? It's not just work. I come home and I give the leftovers to my family.
Right.
It can't be that.
No, it can't be that. And I'm going to say this, and I heard it somewhere, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to say it wrong, but it said the people you work with won't remember the overtime hours that you put in, but your family will remember the times that you weren't present.
Exactly.
Right. And I can look back and be like, man, I wish I would have spent more time at home when the kids were younger. Because I honestly, I remember a time where someone made a comment to me when I was working at the delivery place in Alberta. They said, "Oh, you kissed your wife goodbye on Monday and say you'll see her Saturday."
That's how it was.
And I remember I told my boss at the time, I said, "If you don't let me go home on Monday at a normal time, I quit and I won't be back." And he's like, "What do you mean?" I said, "I haven't seen my newborn son. He's been born for like 3.5. He was only 3 or 4 months old." And I said, "I haven't seen him for longer than an hour for the last 3 weeks." And I said, we've been working to get things done. I mean, I was making good money. It was it was overtime, all that stuff. But he said, if you don't give me time off, I said, I quit. And he's like, okay, you can take, he actually gave me 3 or 4 days off. He was a really good boss. Yeah. He didn't know that I was struggling with this until I actually voiced it to him. And that's a whole different thing. Right?
Well, exactly. And I mean, our oldest was an infant at that time, but like our son was colicky.
Yeah.
And he was colicky 4 months. Our son never slept. He slept maybe an hour, and if he felt the wave of you walk by or the breeze of you walk by, he was awake.
With a closed door.
So, and he screamed. He screamed all the time.
Right. And so honestly, like what we're even saying right now, there's consequences to the imbalance. When you don't figure out the balance and you actively choose your family, and I would say that even in this culture, I would challenge all men and women that your family has to be first over your job. Yeah.
Your spouse should be the priority.
Yeah. And your kids need to be the priority. Like, and again, here's when we say this, you need to work. You need to take care of your family. Yeah. But if that, like we've counseled many men, they're wondering, well, why my marriage is hard? It's like, well, just tell me what's going on. Well, I haven't, I've been in the field for the last 3 months, and I've been home for only one week a month for that whole time. And then, this keeps going on, and we counsel them to like, hey, it might be time for you got to pull back and just be with your family. Then there's an affair that happens, and then they're committing adultery in another city because they're lonely. No, you're just not working on the marriage that you have, and you're not saying, hey, this is a priority. I'm going to change the values of this because money doesn't outweigh your family.
No. And I get that there are occupations that require you to be
There's
away.
Sacrifice. Yeah.
Like I think of military and like our police officers and things like that where they're working some weird hours and
it takes a lot of effort.
It does take a lot of it, and that's the thing. It can be done. You just have to communicate your way through it.
So yeah, it's tough. So here's some of the consequences. There's a lot, and I think we've talked about a lot of these, if not all of them. And it was interesting when we were putting this together that we looked at this and we're like, oh man, we've talked about many of these things. So the first one is just emotional distance. If you're not present, you will be emotionally distant.
Yep. I remember in the years when our kids were younger, like when I said our oldest just screamed the whole time, you would finally get home from work and I would be waiting at the door with the baby.
Yeah, that's right.
And I would hand you the baby, not even a hello. How was your day, honey? No, I was dressed and ready to go. And I gave you the baby and I literally just walked out.
You're like, all right, I'll see you.
Of the house. And it was just that couple of hours. So it was like my own sanity took the priority because you weren't there to shoulder some of the
responsibilities of the house.
Of just having a baby. And like, I mean, we're going to do a podcast on pregnancy and the hormones and all of that, because that's a real thing that a lot of, I think, first-time dads don't get and misunderstand, and causes a lot of undue stress.
Yeah.
So that'll be a different podcast. But, you know, I needed something other than my child taking everything from me all day long. And you weren't there to provide it. So when you came home finally at the end of the day, or whenever you chose to come home, I was emotionally spent and tired and distant, because, you know, we weren't connecting.
Yeah, absolutely. And with emotional distance, even what you've already moved on to not moved on, but you've wrapped up the next one into it, is an increased responsibility on the other person. You already said it. There's an emotional distance. And because of that emotional distance, because I'm not present, or however it is in your relationship, whoever's listening to this, you're not distant, then you actually feel like, she said to me many times over the years, I feel like a single mom. Because I'm just not here. Now, the kids are older now, and even then I had to make adjustments, but the kids are older now. I just bring them with me, and we do church things or work things or
now
life things.
The onus is not just on me, right? Like, I work part-time, so I'm not working full-time any longer or whatnot, but the kids are older, so they're able to help out a little bit more. So, you know, during the day, and my job is super flexible. So during the day, I can just, you know, call my kids. Hey, can you pull this out of the freezer? Our children have assigned dish days and whatnot. So the responsibilities of the home don't just fall on me to do everything. Like, my kids can do their own laundry. My kids help around the house. And I could not, and I wouldn't want to function where I did everything, because I know that would create an atmosphere of, you know, the dragon lady.
That's fair. And then even talking about the kids like that, we have emotional distance, which actually you become like a single mom, and it's increased responsibility. You're doing more because I'm not there. So you're doing 90% of the
and you feel underappreciated.
But then it strains
and that is like you, the workaholic, and me at home. What if the roles are reversed? We know lots of people where the wife is the one that works, and husband is home with the kids. It's the same dynamic.
Oh, yeah.
Regardless of who's the one that's the workaholic.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so that ultimately will end up straining the relationship with your kids.
100%.
Right? Like, I didn't want to come home one day, and I had to make some real adjustments and some attitude changes, especially as Rainen got to be probably 2 or 3, when he recognized that where's dad? Yeah. Like, I want my dad. And I was present, but there was just never enough. And I remember when there was just a major work shift, and I just was like, nope, I'm going to work 9 or 10 hours and I'm coming home. I'm not working 14 or 13 or 14 or 15. I'm coming home at 9 or 10 hours, and I'm going to come home. And I just remember, I don't know if you remember this, that's one of the core memories I have, is I would come home at like 6, and then I would go to the floor, and the boys would attack me with construction paper.
Yes, they made paper swords.
They made paper swords, which really ended up just being like, I don't know, the sticks. They would roll it up, and we would just have paper wars, and that was like a core memory. The first thing I would do, would come home, go to the floor, they would attack me, and we would wrestle for half an hour, and then we would probably eat, watch a show, and then they would go to bed around 7 or 7:30. So we got to hang out with them. But I just remember when everything shifted for me, and my attitude, my perception, and all of a sudden, and then the kids, they were more attached.
Yes.
Right. They needed dad to be present.
And there was a huge period of time where Rainen in particular, Ezra too, that if I left just to go, he would lose his mind. Yeah. And it was like, you know, if you were watching the kids, because you were not super present a lot of the time, created an anxiety within them of being with you. Which,
it's interesting too, because that anxiety, it didn't take long to break with dad just being present.
Exactly. I remember we've been in the current place that we are now for 9 years. Our last Christmas, you were working 18-hour days. Yeah. And it was Christmas. And I remember the kids were old enough to understand that dad has to work. Yeah. And this is awful. And it was horrible. And the work-life balance at that point really was non-existent. It was just work. Yeah. even then,
Yeah.
right? And the kids felt your absence, but they also felt my frustration.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it's not just the absentee parent who is working crazy hours that the anxiety is felt within the children, but it's also the one who's at home. That parent's frustration with, hey, you said you were going to be here at like 5, or you said you were going to, where are you?
Yeah.
And I mean, truth be told, the kids get the brunt of that.
Yeah, absolutely they do. They get they beat up. And the next one is kind of, I love how all of these work together. We've talked about all of this, but it's easy to have communication breakdowns.
Yes, if
right?
you haven't known us, like communication will be something that is mentioned almost every single podcast.
Here's the thing, though, and I was thinking about this. I'm like, you know, it's hard for people to communicate when there's not marriage problems. Like sometimes there's discommunication misses because we're just two different people.
Right.
We're man, woman. We have different personalities, different, all of the reasons why people miscommunicate. And in a healthy relationship, sometimes there's just communication mishaps
100%.
and misses, and you just didn't. You're like, what? But imagine you're piling those already communication errors or communication struggles because maybe you don't communicate well.
Yeah.
On top of the fact that I'm just not around. And then when I'm coming home, you're just pissed off because I've been gone for so long. And not that I was like, oh, one day I worked for 13 hours. It was like, no, you've been gone now for 13, 14 hours for so long. I'm just eternally mad.
Yes.
I'm angry with you. I don't know how to vocalize the difference. I'm so frustrated. And when you come home, there's already communication problem because we're not talking it through. And,
exactly.
And then it's literally just more fuel for the fire.
Yep. And I think that there definitely was some probably depression,
right,
of just feeling isolated by myself.
Yeah.
And also there was no, if I was waiting at the door for an escape just to not have people tugging at me for an hour, we aren't celebrating even the milestones that the kids had accomplished, or like today was a great day.
Yeah.
Right. We're not having any time to even reflect on. And so not only feeling isolated because you were gone, but there was no time for anyone else.
Right.
Because at that time when we're talking like back when our kids were younger, none of our friends had kids.
You're right. That is true.
So we were kind of pioneering this
or our really close had kids, but they were older. They're not older as in gone out of the house, but like their youngest would have been like 12 at
exactly.
the time.
So like what social activities do you use? We had to maximize our time.
Yeah.
Especially when we only had one child who struggled with colic. We had to make sure that we were home because like there was no way he was sleeping anywhere.
Right. Yeah, he didn't
so
for the longest time.
It really created, I felt like a prison at times of just I'm seeing these 4 walls all
way
day,
too much.
every day,
right?
7 days a week, and I have no one to talk to other than the dog,
right?
And my son who was an infant and couldn't talk,
right?
And so it creates a self-isolation, but it also creates a social isolation.
Right. And we've decided in the middle of this podcast that this is going to be a 2-parter.
Yeah, we're scrolling down.
And we're like, oh, we have, and there's so much that we just want to go through with you.
And take our time.
And share with you. So there is a couple solutions, and we're just going to share. We have 4 overall, but we've had full podcasts on each of these, but we've never really talked about work-life balance. But we want to say that here's 2 of the 4 that we want to share with you, and we'll give you the other 2 in the next episode. But the first one is setting boundaries.
We talked about this even 2 podcasts ago when it was like Christmas decking the halls or whatever.
Yeah,
your
that's
insanity
right.
with setting boundaries with family.
Yeah, and like we're seeing a lot of self-care things. Those are good as long as they don't go overboard. And you, in your self-care, it's becoming like work. You're almost neglecting. Now you're neglecting your family because it's more important for you to self-care.
Yeah.
I think that everything in life is moderation.
Exactly.
There's a middle ground to everything. Somebody may be slightly right, slightly left, but there's a middle ground to so many different things. So setting boundaries is unbelievably important.
Setting boundaries, within your work schedule, within your social life. We have like we said at the beginning, we have a big calendar, and we book people out weeks in advance on purpose, because we have a rule in our home that is like no more than 3 things happening in a week, and less than that if we can avoid it.
Yeah.
And I think that that's super important.
Right. And those things are important. I like you say, on Thursday mornings, I have a scheduled 9 to 11 where it's just like study time.
Yeah.
Every week I just take, and there's a few other times I study as well, but that's like booked in the calendar. Nothing gets in the way. And then the other one that we want to share with you is incredibly important, is quality over quantity.
Yeah. And, with our occupations, and with, Brian being a pastor, and sort of us, the tendency, if you find yourself in a church and there's events and there's prayer meetings and there's this and that, it could be so easy to try to be at everything. And I learned this in the last couple of years. Actually, COVID was a real good precursor for prioritizing.
Right.
Since everything's sort of opened up again, it's kind of like, what do I need to be at? And what can I say no to?
Right.
Because even as a pastor's wife, the mindset can be, I have to be at everything.
Right.
And I was at everything for a time because I felt like I had to be.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, well, what am I doing? Because all my kids see me doing is like leaving the door, right? Like, out the door, mom's going out the door. Where are you tonight? Never mind. I already know. It was starting to create some anxiety within me of like, my priorities are way out to lunch.
Yeah. And what we've done is we usually only do 3 nights out, if that many.
Yeah.
And then whenever the kids say are in Tuesday night youth group, they're gone from like 6:30 till 9. We take time in that time to either meet with people, or we'll just go out on a coffee date, just the two of us.
Exactly.
Thursday nights for worship practice, one kid might be gone, or they have play practice. And if Natalie happens not to be at it, we'll go shopping between that time slide. Like, there's ways that you can maximize your time, and it becomes about the quality, not the quantity. Like, honestly, we love being with each other. So
yes, we would be out together every night of the week, except that's unrealistic at this point.
It would drive us crazy, because we're homebodies as well. So we like being out with certain people, and then we like being homebodies. And then there's other people that you just hang out with that are just like being with you, like yourselves. And it's easy to hang out with them, and it's not draining or tiring. And you got to make space for all of that, right? Yeah. And so
focused attention. It's focused attention. It's quantity over quality, or quality over quantity. Yes.
And to make sure that you're not wasting opportunities.
Yeah. Like when we're together, we make a point of being fully engaged.
Yeah. Not on our phones, going for a walk. Sometimes it's to drive because you're forced to stay we don't do movies on dates unless it's a very specific movie we want to see, just because what's the point of a movie if you're going on a date if you can't talk to each other?
Exactly. I would which is probably why I like driving around, because we have to be focused. Well, you have to be focused on the road, but it's uninterrupted quality time.
But also know that Natalie is focused on the road for me, even if she's not driving.
That's true. That's true.
Every man in the whole world that's listening to this is like, that's so true. Absolutely. And so
I just feel it's important to maximize the quality time together, and not just, be out and about all the time, and your spouse gets 10% of you in those moments.
Well, and which there's a whole, not movement, but there's like complete studies about empty nesters and about husbands and wives that just...
It won't be long before we have a podcast on that.
Yeah, we got some of our kids are getting to the age where they're moving out. But there's this whole thing where I want to know who Natalie is after my kids are gone and it's just us in the house.
That's right. I want to look at you and be like, I like you.
Yeah, I still like you, and not have to actually spend a year deciding whether or not I want to still be married to her because the kids are gone.
Yeah.
And do I really love her? No. I want to continue loving her throughout all that time. And it takes so much work and so much effort and so much focused attention. I love that.
Yes.
Focused attention on how we're going to engage with each other and engage with our kids to be the healthiest that we possibly can be. And boy, are we terrible at it sometimes.
Yeah.
We just make straight and misses, and swing and a miss as often as... You'd be surprised. We talk about the podcast, or in the podcast, about our life, and we want you to hear what we're saying, not because it's like, oh, they know everything. It's because no. Almost everything that we talk about, we've walked through in one way, shape, or form, and it's hurt us or it's helped us, and we want it to not hurt you and help you at the same time. So all that being said, if you love this podcast, and we know that you do, there's so many of you listening from all over the world, we really appreciate it.
Thank you.
It means a lot when you share it and you let people know about Amplified Marriage. You can follow us on Instagram and you can follow us on Facebook. If you have a question or a topic or anything you would like us to discuss, please email us at amplifiedmarriage@gmail.com. When you email us, a lot of these topics that we do is because people have asked us the question, or they brought something to our attention and they're like, hey, I actually think this would be something that we really need to talk about. And so, as you've heard us say many times, we believe that your marriage can be reset,
refreshed,
recharged,
and restored.
Thanks for listening.
Talk to you soon.